Chapter 1. An ordinary morning, a very unordinary feeling. The alarm clock on Issei Hayata's nightstand had been screaming at him for approximately 6 minutes before he finally rolled over and slapped it into silence. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom the way a man might stare at the sky before a storm, aware that something was coming, unsure of exactly what shape it would take. He was 17 years old. He was a second-year student at Ko Academy. He was, by most reasonable metrics, an unremarkable young man in an unremarkable suburb of a perfectly ordinary Japanese city. He was also, as of 3 weeks ago, the servant of a devil. Rias, heiress to one of the great pillar families of the underworld, had saved his life on a night when a fallen angel had decided that Issei Hayata was not meant to survive to see his 18th birthday. She had gathered what remained of him, pressed a single chess piece into his soul, and reborn him as something new. A pawn. Her pawn. He should have felt grateful. He did feel grateful. What he had not expected was the way that gratitude kept getting tangled up with other feelings he did not quite have names for yet. Issei sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. Through the thin walls of the Hayata household he could hear his mother moving around the kitchen downstairs, the clatter of breakfast dishes, the low hum she made when she was thinking about something. He had grown up with that sound. It meant safety. It meant home. He reached for his school uniform. The walk to Ko Academy took 14 minutes at a normal pace and about 9 if Issei was running late, which he usually was. Today he was somehow on time, and the extra minutes made the world feel strange around him. He noticed things he normally rushed past. A cat sleeping on top of a mailbox. An old woman watering the potted plants outside her front door, moving with the deliberate slowness of someone who has decided that the world can wait. He was almost at the school gates when he heard his name. Issei. He turned. Akeno Himejima was standing a few steps behind him, and for just a moment the morning light caught in her long black hair and made it look like something poured from a jar of ink. She was smiling at him, the way she always smiled, which was to say with a warmth that made most people around her feel slightly off balance. Akeno-san, he said, and hated the way his voice went slightly higher than he intended. She fell into step beside him without being asked. This was also something she always did. You look like someone who has been thinking too hard, she said. I look like someone who just woke up. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. She tilted her head. The gesture was bird-like, precise. You have been quieter than usual lately. We have all noticed. Issei considered this. The truth was that there were things rattling around inside his head that he did not know how to talk about yet. Not the devil stuff. He had gotten surprisingly used to the devil stuff. It was the other things. The way Rias looked at him sometimes, like he was a problem she found genuinely interesting. The way Koneko could say more with a silence than most people said with entire paragraphs. The way Akeno herself had a habit of appearing at the edges of his days like a footnote that kept turning out to be more important than the main text. I am fine, he said. Akeno's smile did not waver. You are allowed to not be fine, you know. No one keeps score of that here. He looked at her sideways. In the early light she looked older than she was, or maybe younger, he could never quite decide. There was something layered about her face, like a painting that had been worked on and reworked over many years. Thanks, he said, and meant it. She nodded, and for a few steps they walked in silence, and the silence was not uncomfortable, which was its own kind of surprise. The Occult Research Club occupied a room in the older wing of the school, the part where the hallways smelled faintly of old wood, and the windows stuck unless you knew exactly which corner to push. Issei had come to think of it as the most real place in the building, which was ironic given what happened inside it. He arrived early, which almost never happened. The room was empty except for Rias, who was sitting at the head of the long table with a book open in front of her and a cup of tea cooling at her elbow. She was not reading. She was looking at the window. She looked up when he came in. You are early, she said. I know. Sorry. She raised an eyebrow. Why are you apologizing for being early? Issei opened his mouth and then closed it again. It was a fair question. He sat down, not at the far end where he usually positioned himself, but somewhere in the middle, which felt like a small act of courage. Rias watched him with those eyes of hers, the deep vivid blue that he had never quite gotten used to. She had the quality, he had noticed, of making you feel like you were the most interesting thing in whatever room she was in, and she probably did not even mean to do it. How are you sleeping? She asked. Fine. Mostly. Issei, he sighed. Some nights are weird. I have dreams sometimes. Nothing bad, he added quickly. Just strange. Like I am standing in a place I have never been, and somehow I know exactly where everything is. Rias was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that is not uncommon for newly reborn servants. The soul takes time to settle into its new form. The dreams are usually its way of processing the change. Does it stop? Eventually, she said. It becomes something else instead. He looked at her. What does it become? She picked up her teacup and took a careful sip. Over the rim of the cup she looked back at him, and her expression was one he could not fully read, which happened more often than he would have liked. Something quieter, she said finally. Something you stop noticing because it has become part of you. Issei turned this over in his mind. Outside the old windows of the clubroom, the morning was going on without them, students crossing the courtyard in clusters, pigeons finding breadcrumbs on the pavement, the world doing its steady indifferent work. Bucho, he said. Yes? Thank you. For the other thing too. For what you did. You know. Rias set her cup down. For a moment something moved across her face that was more unguarded than her usual composure. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. You have thanked me for that before, she said. I know. I am going to keep doing it. She looked back at the window. That is a very you thing to say, she told him. And there was something in her voice when she said it that made the morning feel, for just a moment, like it was holding its breath. Chapter 2. What the Kitchen Teaches. It was Akeno who taught Issei to make tea properly. This happened on a Tuesday, which was an ordinary sort of day for such a thing, and it happened because Issei had arrived at the clubroom before anyone else, made a pot of what he confidently believed to be tea, and handed Rias a cup that she received with the careful expression of someone trying to be very polite about something. It is a little, she began. Terrible, Koneko said from the doorway. She walked past him, set her school bag down, and sat in her usual chair with the settled economy of motion of a cat who has found a preferred spot and intends to keep it. Issei stared at the cup in Rias's hand. It is just tea. It is not, Koneko said, without inflection, which somehow made it worse. Akeno arrived 10 minutes later, took one look at the pot, and decided the situation required intervention. She set the offending pot aside with the gentleness of someone relocating an injured bird, filled the kettle, and stood at the small counter in the corner of the clubroom with the particular attention she brought to everything she considered worth doing well. Come here, she said to Issei. He came. He stood beside her, close enough to watch her hands, and she walked him through it. The temperature of the water, which mattered more than he had known. The way the leaves needed space to move if they were going to give you what they had. The waiting, which was the part most people skipped. You are impatient, she observed, not unkindly. I like things to happen, he said. I know. But some things get better if you let them take their time. She was watching the steam rise from the kettle. Tea is one of them. Some people are another. Issei looked at her profile. She was smiling at the kettle, which was a little odd, but Akeno had a quality of finding things quietly amusing that he had given up trying to track. Is that a lesson? He asked. Everything is a lesson if you decide to learn it. She poured the water with a steady, unhurried arc. My grandmother used to say that patience is just love in its most disciplined form. Issei thought about this. That is pretty heavy for a Tuesday morning. Akeno laughed, a real one, not the practice bell tone she sometimes used in public. This one was shorter and slightly surprised, and he liked it considerably more. Heavy things can still be true, she said. He nodded. Then, because he was Issei and he often spoke before he fully thought things through, he said, You are different than I expected you to be, you know. She glanced at him. What did you expect? I do not know exactly. Something more, he searched for the word, surface level. You are nice to everyone, which sometimes makes it hard to tell when you are being actually nice versus just being nice. She considered this for a long moment. The tea was steeping. Most people do not think about that distinction, she said. I have been thinking about a lot of things lately. She turned to look at him properly, and her eyes were warmer than usual, or maybe just less filtered. Which version do you think this is? The actual one, he said. Right now, I mean. This. Akeno looked at him for a moment, then at the tea, then back at him. Something shifted in her expression, small and private. You are more perceptive than you let on, she said. I am trying to be better at noticing things. She poured the tea into cups, precise and careful, and handed him the first one. You are doing well, she said. It was a quiet thing, but it landed like something solid. That evening Issei walked home in the last of the light, and thought about the day. It had contained no battles, no demonic negotiations, no crises requiring immediate supernatural response. It had contained a bad cup of tea replaced by a good one and a conversation at a counter with someone he was slowly learning to see more clearly. He was not sure why that felt like something. He suspected it was because all the truly important things felt like nothing at first. He was almost to his front door when his phone buzzed. A message from a number he had not saved yet, which turned out to be Akeno when he opened it. The message said, "The tea tomorrow will be even better. I will show you the next step." Issei stood on his doorstep for a moment, holding his phone, watching the street lamps come on one by one down the length of his street. He typed back, looking forward to it. Then he went inside, where his mother had made dinner and his father was watching television and everything smelled like rice and home, and he sat down at the table and was, without any particular ceremony, happy. Chapter 3. Rias Gremory and the Problem of Rain. It rained on Thursday with the kind of commitment that made umbrellas seem like a polite suggestion rather than a solution. Issei had forgotten his umbrella, which was not a surprise. He was standing under the narrow overhang outside the school's main building watching the world turn gray and wet when Rias appeared beside him. She had an umbrella. It was the deep red of her hair, which he suspected was not a coincidence. "You forgot yours again," she said. "I always forget it." "I know." She held the umbrella out at an angle that was clearly an offer. Issei looked at it, looked at the rain, looked at the distance between the main building and the clubroom, and made the reasonable calculation. They walked together under the one umbrella, which meant being closer than their usual distance, which meant Issei was very aware of the sound of rain hitting fabric above them, and the smell of her shampoo, something light and clean like a garden after exactly this kind of rain. Rias walked with the calm of someone who had decided the elements were simply the setting rather than an inconvenience. She did not hurry. She did not tilt the umbrella in a way that would have kept herself drier at his expense, which he noticed, and filed away. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can always ask me something. What was it like," he began, "when you were first building your peerage? The first time you had people who were yours to look after?" Rias was quiet for a few steps. Rain tapped the umbrella like fingers on a table. "Terrifying," she said. He blinked. He had not expected that word from her. "Really? Really? You love people and then you are responsible for them, which is the most wonderful and most frightening thing I can think of. Every time one of them is in danger, some part of me insists that I should be the one in that danger instead. That is not a very practical way to run a peerage." "No," she agreed, with a dry edge to it. "Akeno has told me this several times. She is considerably more pragmatic than I am about certain things, even if she pretends otherwise." Issei turned this information over. It rearranged some things. "You worry about us," he said. "Yes. All of us. Yes. Even Koneko, who could probably flatten most minor threats with one hand behind her back." Rias gave him a look that was approximately fond and approximately exasperated and approximately something else that he did not have a label for yet. "Especially Koneko. She would never ask for help, which means someone has to watch." They reached the door to the old wing. She lowered the umbrella and shook it clean with an efficient flick. "Issei," she said. "Yeah? I worry about you too." "Specifically you?" She said it without particular drama, the way she said most true things, as if they were simply facts of the world and there was no point being theatrical about facts. "I want you to know that." He looked at her. She was looking at the door handle, which meant he could look at her without her looking back, which happened rarely enough that he took the opportunity seriously. I know, he said. I know you do. I can tell now. I am getting better at noticing. She opened the door. Inside, the corridor smelled like old wood and the particular warmth of a building full of people keeping the rain out. Good, she said. Keep practicing. Later that evening, Issei sat at his desk and opened his homework, and stared at it for a while without reading it. He was thinking about the word terrifying and the way Rias had said it with no apology, as if being terrified were not a weakness but simply a category of experience that happened to things worth caring about. He thought about the umbrella. He thought about the way the rain had sounded. He wrote 2 pages of notes for history class and then stopped, looked at the window where rain was still falling in long silver lines, and thought, I am going to be okay. He was not entirely sure where that thought had come from. He kept it anyway. Chapter 4. Koneko speaks in paragraphs. Most people assumed Koneko Tuja said very little because she had very little to say. Issei had believed this for the first few weeks too. He had revised the opinion the way you revise a map after walking the actual territory, gradually, and with some embarrassment at the earlier version. Koneko said very little because she was careful with words in a way that most people were not. Every sentence she produced had apparently passed through some interior quality control that Issei was only beginning to understand. Nothing extra. Nothing approximate. Just the thing itself, or nothing. He discovered this properly on a Wednesday when he arrived at the clubroom before everyone else for the second time in his life and found her there, sitting on the windowsill with her legs folded under her, reading a book with the concentration of someone diffusing something delicate. He tried to be quiet. She looked up immediately. You are trying to be quiet, she said. I did not want to interrupt. She looked at him with eyes that had the quality of measuring things accurately. You are not interrupting. I heard you 3 hallways away. He sat down. She went back to her book. He did his homework. For a while the room held only the sound of turning pages and pencil on paper and rain. It was still raining. This was apparently a week of rain, against the window. Then Koneko said, without looking up, You have been trying harder lately. Issei looked over at her. She was still reading. Trying harder at what? Things. She turned a page. At noticing things. At not being the version of yourself that you put on in public. He processed this. The public version. The loud one, she said, with no judgment in it. The one that takes up space on purpose so no one thinks to look at what is actually going on inside. Issei put his pencil down. That is an extremely specific observation. I am specific, she said simply. Do you? He started, and then stopped. Do you do that too? The taking up space on purpose thing? Except in reverse, I mean. Being quiet so people stop looking. Koneko considered this seriously, which was the only way she considered things. Yes, she said. Then, after a pause, it works better than the loud version, in some ways. Worse in others. What are the worse ways? She looked at him over the top of her book. Her face was, as always, composed, but there was something in her eyes that was not quite composure. More like watchfulness, the careful attention of someone who has learned that the world is not always predictable, and has decided to pay close attention to it just in case. People assume, she said, that quiet means you do not need anything. They stop offering. They stop asking. She looked back at her book. Sometimes you have to want things loudly enough that the world notices, even when that is not your natural register. Issei looked at her for a long time. That is the most I have ever heard you say at once. Yes, she said. Thank you. She turned another page. You asked the right question? He thought about that on the way home. About questions and the things they could open, and about Koneko on a windowsill reading a book with the kind of concentration that was its own language. He thought, everyone in that room has a whole interior geography that has nothing to do with what is immediately visible. He thought, I have been looking at the surface of things like someone who only reads the covers of books. He thought, I should read more carefully. He was home before he realized he had walked the whole 14 minutes without checking his phone once, which might have been a personal record. Chapter 5. The night shift of being someone's anchor. The first time a battle went badly, it went badly fast. There was a stray devil, newly independent, and not in any way interested in negotiation, and there were 4 members of the Occult Research Club in a warehouse on the edge of the city at 11 in the evening, and there was a moment in the middle of it all when Issei took a hit he had not seen coming and hit the concrete floor hard enough to see his own vision white out at the edges. He was back on his feet in 20 seconds. The fight was over in 4 minutes. Everyone was fine. But the adrenaline took hours to leave, and they all knew it, and no one suggested going straight home afterward. They sat in the parking lot outside the warehouse in the particular silence of people who have done something difficult together, and have not yet figured out what to say about it. Rias sat beside Issei on the concrete divider, and did not say anything for a while, which was one of the things he was learning to value about her. She understood that certain silences were not problems to solve. Eventually he said, "I did not see that third one coming." "No. It was fast. I nearly missed it too." Nearly is not the same as actually. This time, no, he was quiet. Somewhere in the dark Akeno was speaking to Koneko in a low voice, their conversation punctuated now and then by a sound from Koneko that might have been a response. "Does it get easier?" Issei asked. "The after part. The part where the energy runs out, and your brain catches up to your body." "Yes. That part." Rias thought about it honestly, which was something he had come to trust about her, that she did not give him comfortable answers just because comfortable answers existed. "It gets more familiar," she said. "You learn what you need. Some people need noise, some need quiet. Some people need to eat something, which," she glanced sideways at him, "I suspect you are one of." "I could eat," he admitted. "There is a ramen place 3 blocks north that is open late." He looked at her. In the orange light of the parking lot, her red hair looked nearly black and her eyes looked darker than usual, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had been tired for a long time and had made her peace with it, and come out the other side. "You come here often?" he asked. The corner of her mouth moved. "After bad nights, sometimes. You should have told me earlier. I would have made the nights go faster." "You did make this one faster," she said. "Considerably." He felt something in his chest adjust. Not dramatically, just a small quiet settling. "Ramen," he said. "Ramen," she agreed. They went. All 4 of them, Rias and Issei and Akeno and Koneko, in the warm orange light of a late-night ramen shop while rain returned to the streets outside and a tired man behind the counter served them without asking questions. They ate, and the tension of the evening slowly softened into something else, something that was not quite ordinary but was adjacent to it. Koneko ate 2 bowls, which Akeno told him later was a sign she was comfortable, that she only ever did that when she felt completely safe. He filed that away with everything else. He was building a picture, piece by piece, of people who trusted him enough to let him see the real thing. He was taking it seriously. He intended to deserve it. Chapter 6. Letters written and not sent. Issei did not consider himself a person who wrote things down. He was more the kind of person who thought in short bursts, acted quickly, and sorted out meaning afterward. But after the warehouse evening and the ramen and the walk home alone in the rain that had returned, it always returned, he sat at his desk and opened a notebook and found himself writing. Not a journal, exactly. More like notes to himself. Observations. Things he was figuring out. He wrote, "Rias worries about all of us but does not say it because she has decided that a leader who shows worry undermines the people who depend on her. She is wrong about this but she has not figured that out yet. I think she will." He wrote, "Akeno is the most complicated person I have ever met in the sense that she has decided to be warm to everyone and means it genuinely but also uses the warmth as a kind of armor. You cannot be wounded in a place where you have already opened the door. I am not sure she knows she does this." He wrote, "Koneko says exactly what she means and nothing else, and I think this is either the most efficient or the most courageous way to move through the world or possibly both." He stopped. He looked at what he had written. Then he wrote, "What does this say about me that I notice these things now and I did not before?" He sat with that for a while. He wrote, "I think I was looking for something big and obvious. Something with a name and a clear shape. And what is actually happening is smaller and realer than that. It is a cup of tea made correctly. It is an umbrella in the rain. It is someone saying the true thing instead of the easy thing. It is sitting in a ramen shop after a bad night, and discovering that the bad night has stopped being the worst part. He closed the notebook. It was past midnight. His mother had long since gone to sleep and his father after her, and the house was making its quiet nighttime sounds, the creak of boards settling, the low hum of the refrigerator 2 floors down. He lay back on his bed and looked at the ceiling. He thought about the chess piece in his soul, which did not hurt, which had never hurt, which had slipped in like something that had always meant to be there. He thought about what Rias had said about the dreams becoming something quieter. Something you stopped noticing because it had become part of you. He thought, I am becoming something. I do not know the full shape of it yet. He thought, I am okay with that. I am actually okay with not knowing yet. Outside his window the rain had finally stopped, and the city was quiet, and the stars were doing their patient work of existing very far away and being beautiful about it. And Issei was 17 years old and changed, and just beginning to understand what that meant. He slept without any strange dreams that night, which Rias had told him meant the soul was settling, and in the morning his mother made breakfast and the world resumed and he walked to school in 14 minutes exactly and arrived not late, not early, but right on time. Which was, he was starting to understand, exactly where he was supposed to be. Chapter 7. The architecture of a morning routine. 3 weeks after the ramen shop evening Issei had, without fully deciding to, developed a habit. He arrived at school 12 minutes before the first bell. He went to the clubroom. He made tea, using the method Akeno had shown him, which he had practiced at home twice now on weekend mornings while his mother watched with the particular expression parents wear when they notice something new in a child they thought they knew completely. The first person to arrive was always Akeno. He was not sure if this was a coincidence, or something she had arranged, and he had decided he did not need to know. She would come in, set her bag on the chair nearest the window, and look at what he had made with the careful attention of a music teacher listening to a student play a piece for the second time. Better, she had said the first morning. The temperature was right this time. I practiced, he said. She had looked at him with something new in her expression, something he did not immediately have a name for. Satisfied was part of it. But there was a warmer layer underneath that. By the 3rd week she had stopped assessing it, and started simply drinking it, which he understood to be the higher compliment. On a Monday in what was becoming the pattern, she came in, picked up her cup, sat down across from him, and said, My mother used to drink tea like this. The sentence landed in the room with a weight he had not expected. Issei did not ask anything immediately. He had learned from Koneko that some things needed a moment of space before they could become a conversation. After a moment Akeno said, She died when I was young. I do not talk about her often. But this, she held up the cup slightly. Sometimes I can almost reconstruct the smell of the kitchen she used to use. Is that good or hard? Issei asked. She looked at him. Both, she said. The good kind of hard. He nodded. He understood that category. He had been living in it for a month now. Tell me something about her, he said. If you want. You do not have to. Akeno wrapped both hands around her cup. Outside the window the morning was doing its usual things, birds and light and the distant sound of the school's day getting started, but in the clubroom things were slower and more deliberate. She sang while she cooked, Akeno said. Not well. Not badly either. Just the way some people sing, like the music is just thinking out loud. A pause. I have her hair. I did not used to like that fact, and now I do. Why did you not used to like it? She considered. Because it was a thing I could not change, and I was at an age when I wanted to change everything I could not choose for myself. And now I understand that some of the things you did not choose are the best parts. She said it without sentimentality, as a plain observation. Issei turned it over. He thought about the chess piece that had chosen him, or that he had been given, or both. He thought about the people who had come with it. Yeah, he said. I am starting to see that. Akeno looked at him over the rim of her cup. The morning light caught in her hair exactly the way it always did on clear days, the same way it had on the first day he had really noticed her. He thought, she carries her mother with her, right there, every single day, whether she knows it or not. He thought, that is an extraordinary thing. He said none of this, Because some things you hold on to for a while before you try to put them into words. Koneko arrived 9 minutes later, and the morning resumed its regular shape. But something had been added to it, something small and permanent. The way a very fine crack in a wall is not damage, but is instead the record of the building having settled into its foundation. Chapter 8. Rias has a bad day. Everyone had bad days. This was one of the things Issei had understood in theory before and was beginning to understand in practice now that he was paying better attention. Rias's bad days looked different from other people's bad days. The average person, when things went wrong, became visibly wrong. They slouched, or they snapped at things they normally let pass, or they wore it plainly on their face like a flag. Rias did not do any of these things, which was the problem. What she did instead was become extremely, flawlessly composed. Every word precise. Every gesture measured. She was kind to everyone she spoke to and handled every piece of club business with complete competence, and did not say anything that was not necessary, and did not ask for anything at all. Issei recognized this pattern by the 4th week. He recognized it because he had seen the non-performed version of her often enough now that the performance was visible to him the way a particular note is audible to someone who knows the melody. He waited until everyone else had left the clubroom that evening. Akeno had given him a glance on her way out that said something like, "I see it too," which was useful confirmation. Rias was sitting at the head of the table, going through papers that she had been going through for 20 minutes without appearing to actually read them. "Bucho," he said. Bad day?" She turned a page. "Everything is fine. I know that." I asked if it was a bad day. She looked up. Something shifted in her expression, the very edge of the composure, like the corner of a mask not quite sitting flat. "What makes you ask? You have been perfect all day," he said. "You are only perfect like that when something is wrong." She looked at him for a long, still moment. Then she set the papers down. "I received a letter this morning," she said. "From home. From the underworld." She paused. "There are negotiations happening around my future that I was not consulted about, which is not unusual, but this particular development is one I find," she searched for the word, "suffocating." Issei did not push for details. He pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. "Okay," he said. She blinked. "Okay? Yeah. I am not going anywhere if you want to keep talking, or I can just sit here if you do not." "Either is fine." Rias stared at him. It was not the kind of stare that meant she found him strange, though she sometimes did. It was the kind that meant she was re-examining something she had assumed she already understood. "You are," she began, and stopped. "What?" She shook her head slightly. "I was going to say something patronizing and I caught myself." "You have gotten better at this," she said. "Being here. The actual version of here, not just the physical one." "I had good teachers," he said. She was quiet for a while. He did not fill the silence. Outside the windows the school was emptying, the sounds of departing students fading into the distance, until the clubroom was quiet enough that the old building could make its usual sounds. "The negotiations concern a potential arrangement," Rias said eventually. "My family believes that certain alliances are best secured through," she moved her hand slightly, "conventional means. I have opinions about this that are not being requested." "Your opinions should be requested," Issei said flatly. "It is your life." She looked at him. Something in her eyes shifted, something raw and quick. "Yes," she said. "It is." "Then say so," he said. "I know you know how to say things clearly when you want to. I have watched you explain the entire structure of Devil Society to Koneko in 11 minutes using only 2 metaphors." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the precursor to one. "That was an impressive 11 minutes, she said. "So say it that clearly. To whoever needs to hear it." She looked at the papers in front of her for a long moment. Then she looked at him. The composure had not broken, but it had softened, which was different, which was actually better. "You make things sound very simple," she said. "Most things are simpler than people make them. The complicated part is usually just being scared." She was quiet. "Then, when did you start saying things like that?" "Couple of weeks ago. I have been paying attention." Rias, heiress of one of the most powerful families in the underworld, looked at Issei Hayato, recently reborn devil and second-year student at Ko Academy, and the thing in her eyes now was not raw and quick but was instead something slower and more lasting. Something that had clearly been building for a while, and had just found a moment to surface. "Thank you," she said. "For staying." "Always," he said, which he had not planned to say but which turned out to be exactly true. Chapter 9. Koneko and the Business of Growing Things. The rooftop garden was Issei's discovery, which was to say that Koneko had been maintaining it for 2 years and Issei had only just found it. He had gone up there on a Saturday to look at the view, the way you sometimes needed to be above your own situation to see it properly, and had found, tucked along the south-facing wall behind a row of old ventilation units, 4 wooden planter boxes filled with herbs and 1 small, determined tomato plant. He had been staring at them for approximately 3 minutes when he heard a door open behind him. Koneko came through it carrying a watering can and wearing, for the first time he had ever seen, an expression that was something like caught. They looked at each other. "You have a garden," Issei said. "Yes. On the school rooftop. The light is good here." He looked at the planter boxes again. They were clearly well tended. Someone had tied the tomato plant to a small stake with a piece of string. The herbs were trimmed in a way that suggested regular attention. "Can I sit here?" he asked. She considered him for a moment. Then she moved to the planters and began to water without answering, which he had learned meant yes. He sat on the low wall near the ventilation units. Koneko moved along the planter boxes with the methodical care she brought to everything. The tomato plant got particular attention. She checked the string on the stake and retied it where it had loosened. "You like growing things," he said. "Things that grow slowly," she said. "Things you have to pay attention to. Tomatoes will tell you when they need water if you know how to look. Most plants will." "How do you know how to look?" "You learn they're normal first," she said. "Then anything that is not normal is visible." Issei thought about this. He thought about how much of the past month had been exactly that process. Learning what normal looked like for the people around him so he could tell when something was off. "That applies to people too," he said. Koneko glanced at him. "Yes. Is that why you are good at knowing things about us? Rias and Akeno and me?" She was quiet for a moment. She moved the watering can to the herb boxes. "Partly," she said. "Partly it is because I do not talk much, so people forget I am watching." "Do you prefer it that way?" Another pause. "I used to. I am less sure now." "What changed?" She set the watering can down and looked at the tomato plant, which was small but had 3 visible fruits in various stages of ripening. "People started paying attention back," she said. Then, very quietly, "It is different when it goes both ways." Issei looked at the side of her face. In the afternoon light she looked younger than she usually seemed, or maybe just less armored. He had spent enough time around her now to know that the blankness was not absence. It was protection. Something she had built around a person who was, underneath it, surprisingly tender. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am glad I found the garden." She picked up the watering can again. Her back was to him. "You can come back," she said. "On Saturdays. If you want." It was such a small sentence. He understood it was not a small thing. "I will bring something," he said. "What do tomatoes need that you do not already have?" She thought about it seriously. "Calcium. The soil here is a little low. I will look it up." "Crushed eggshells work," she said. "Save them." He nodded. He made a note in his phone. When he looked up she was facing the city, her hair moving slightly in the rooftop wind, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had been alone in a place for a long time and had just decided it was all right to have company. Chapter 10. What Akeno Fears. The library was empty on Wednesday afternoons because of a scheduling quirk that most students had figured out and were using to their advantage elsewhere. Issei had claimed a corner table near the back for homework purposes. He was there on the Wednesday of the 5th week when Akeno sat down across from him without being asked, which was also something she did. "You are studying," she observed. "Trying to. You have written 4 words in the past 10 minutes. I counted them." He pushed the notebook slightly away. History is difficult when the people doing it have been making the same mistakes repeatedly for several thousand years. It is instructive for the same reason. That is a very teacher thing to say. She smiled, then looked down at the table. There was something quieter about her today than usual, he noticed. The warmth was still there, but it was turned down slightly, like a lamp someone had adjusted without quite meaning to. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "Do you ever," she started, and he watched her choose words with more care than usual, "find that the things you are most afraid of are not the dramatic ones? Not the battles or the failures or the visible things, but the smaller ones?" Issei put his pencil down. "Yes," he said. "What are yours?" He thought about it honestly. "That I will stop being worth the trouble I cause. That the people who have decided to trust me will figure out they made a mistake, and I will not have time to fix it." Akeno was looking at him with a tension he could feel. "That is not a small fear," she said. "No. But it does not come with sound effects. It is just there, sometimes, underneath the regular day." She nodded slowly. "Mine is," she paused. "I am afraid of becoming someone people love for the wrong reasons. For the surface. For the warmth I put out, because I have learned that warmth is what people move toward. I sometimes cannot tell if the version of me people care about is the real one, or only the performed one." Issei looked at her. He thought about every interaction he had catalogued. The tea counter. The parking lot. The library on various afternoons. The real laugh versus the practiced one. "I can tell," he said. She looked at him carefully. "You think so? The real version says things that are actually true even when the true thing is a little heavy. The performed version is slightly more careful. You have been the real one for most of the last month, around me at least." Something happened in her eyes. Not quite alarm, not quite relief. Something that was both things at once. "And?" she asked, which was not a question she usually asked. Usually she moved past the vulnerable moment with something graceful. She was not doing that now. "And I like the real one considerably more," he said, with the directness he had been practicing. "The performed one is impressive. But the real one is," he thought about it, "interesting. Like a problem worth paying attention to. Not a problem in the bad way. The good kind of problem." Akeno looked at him for a long time. Long enough that a student at the far end of the library dropped a book, and the sound crashed through the room, and neither of them reacted. "A problem worth paying attention to," she said. "Yeah. That was awkward. I think I said it wrong." "No," she said. "You said it exactly right." She smiled, and it was the real one, the shorter and slightly surprised version, and it stayed on her face for longer than usual this time. He went back to his history notes. She pulled out her own book. The library was quiet around them, and the afternoon went on doing what afternoons do, which is to say it passed without anyone noticing and left something behind anyway. Chapter 11. A Battle and Its Aftermath, revised. The second bad battle was worse than the first in the way that second things often are, because you have lost the useful protection of not knowing what bad looks like. It was a stray devil situation that had been described as manageable and turned out to be two stray devils, which was not the same thing. Nobody was seriously hurt. The definition of not seriously hurt, Issei was learning, had a wide range. He had taken a hit to his left arm that was going to be a bruise the size of a dinner plate by morning, and Akeno had expended considerably more energy than she had planned to, and Koneko was moving with the deliberate economy of someone managing soreness, and Rias had the particular tension in her jaw that meant she was angry at herself for a miscalculation. They ended up at the Hayate residence because it was closest, and because Issei's parents were visiting his aunt for the weekend, and because Rias made the decision with the certainty of someone who had decided that logistics were solvable. Issei's mother had left the kitchen well stocked, and he knew where everything was. He made rice. Akeno, who had recovered enough to be practical, made soup from what was available. Koneko sat at the kitchen table and shelled edamame with methodical focus, which he understood to be her way of stabilizing herself. Rias stood in the doorway of the kitchen for a moment, taking in the scene, and something in her expression that had been tightly held for the past hour finally came loose. She sat at the table near Koneko. "I should have confirmed the count before we went in," she said. "Yes," Koneko said, which was not unkind. It was simply true, and Koneko did not waste energy making true things softer when they did not need to be. "The intelligence was incomplete," Akeno said from the stove. "We have all worked from incomplete intelligence before. We got through it, Issei said. He was watching the rice. Everyone walked out. That is the line. Everything before it is a lesson, not a failure. Rias looked at him. The tension in her jaw had eased. You have been spending time with Akeno, she said. I have been spending time with all of you, he said. I pick up things. He makes tea correctly now, Akeno offered. The tomato plant on the roof has 3 fruits, Koneko added, without context though it functioned as one. Rias looked around the kitchen, at the 3 of them, at the rice and the soup and the edamame, at the late hour and the warm light and the ordinary domesticity of recovering from something difficult together. This is, she started. Yeah, Issei said. She let the sentence go unfinished, which meant she did not need to finish it. They ate at the kitchen table at an hour that was technically the next day, and the food was good because it was made carefully from available ingredients, and the conversation wandered from battle analysis to school to the question of whether the tomato plant would produce enough fruit to be worth the effort, a question Koneko answered with the detailed certainty of someone who had already done the calculation. Afterward Rias sat on the couch in the living room and fell asleep reading something, which Issei discovered when he came back from doing the dishes. She had tucked her legs up and her red hair had fanned out against the cushion, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had finally stopped performing rest and was actually having some. He got a blanket from the hall closet and put it over her without waking her. He turned off the main light and left the lamp on low. Akeno, who had been watching from the doorway, said very quietly, You are good at this. At what? Looking after people without making them feel looked after. He considered this. Is that a skill? It is a rare one, she said, equally quiet. Most people who care do it in ways that remind you are being cared for, which can make you feel like a problem. You do not do that. He did not have anything to say to that. He stood in the dim hallway of his parents' house and felt the weight of the day settling into something he could carry. Good night, Akeno-san, he said. Good night, Issei, she said, and it was the first time she had used his name without the honorific, and neither of them mentioned it, and it stayed in the air of the hallway after she had gone. Chapter 12. The day Rias laughed unexpectedly. It happened on a Thursday, in the clubroom, over a completely ordinary piece of school gossip that Issei repeated badly because he had only half paid attention to it when it was told to him. He was recounting something that had happened in the first-year corridor, a misunderstanding involving a classroom plant, a borrowed umbrella, and a very confused PE teacher. And he was aware partway through that he had confused 2 elements of the story and continued anyway because stopping to correct himself would have required explaining which parts were wrong, and he was not entirely sure. He got to the end. Rias was looking at him with the expression of someone who had been following a map and arrived somewhere unexpected. That, she said carefully, does not entirely make sense. I know. I think I mixed up the umbrella and the plant at some point. They were the same umbrella? Possibly. Or the plant was there for a separate reason. Was the PE teacher involved in the plant situation, or the umbrella situation? I genuinely do not know. Rias stared at him. Then she laughed. Not the polished, composed version she produced in public, but a real one, sudden and slightly surprised, the kind that happens when something catches a person who was not expecting it. It lasted only a few seconds, and then she pulled it back with the slightly flustered expression of someone who had not planned to do that. Issei stared at her. That was, he said. Do not, she said. I was going to say nice. Oh. She straightened slightly. Smooth something that did not need smoothing. Well, you should do that more, he said. Laugh at confusing stories? Laugh when something is funny. Without the version where you remember you are Rias Gremory and pull it back. She looked at him. The slight flusteredness had faded, but whatever had caused it was still there, just behind her composure, visible to him now in the way the performed version was always visible once you had seen the real one. You are very direct lately, she said. I have been practicing. At being direct? At saying true things clearly? It is harder than it sounds. Most true things have a lot of ways to say them, and some of the ways are easier than what you actually mean. Rias was quiet for a moment. Through the old windows the afternoon was doing its slow golden work. What did you actually mean, she said. Just now. About the laughing. He thought about it. I meant that I like seeing you be a person rather than a position. And I think you do not get enough opportunities for that. And I think when it happens you are, he considered the word lighter. Like something you have been carrying got put down for a second. She did not say anything right away. The room was very quiet. I am going to have to think about that, she said finally. Take your time. You are infuriating sometimes, you know. Yeah, I know. In a way that is mostly not infuriating, she added, which was the most convoluted thing he had ever heard her say, and coming from someone who routinely used elaborate structure he understood this meant something. Akeno arrived 5 minutes later and found them sitting in the particular comfortable silence of two people who have just said something true to each other, and are letting it settle. She set her bag down, looked at both of them, and said nothing, which was the correct response. Chapter 13. In which Issei asks for help. He did not ask for help easily. He had not, historically. Asking for help required admitting a gap, and admitting a gap required trusting that the person you were admitting it to would not think worse of you for it. He was getting better at the trusting part. The problem was his sacred gear, which was technically not a problem in the way a gear problem is usually a problem. The boosted gear worked. It worked exactly as described and slightly better than expected. The issue was that Issei could feel there was more to it than he was accessing, like a room with a door he did not know how to open. He brought it to Rias on a Friday after the others had left. I think I am stuck, he said. She looked up from her book. Stuck how? With the gear. There is something I cannot get to. I can feel the edge of it, but I do not know how to cross it. Rias set her book down and gave him the kind of full attention she gave to things she considered important. He had learned this look. It meant she was allocating real thought. Describe the feeling, she said. He tried. He described the sense of a boundary, not a wall but more like a doorframe with no door in it yet, the shape of an opening that had not quite opened. He described the way it felt during the second battle, right at the moment when the stakes had been highest, like something in him had leaned toward the gap without quite reaching it. Rias listened with the patient attention of someone who was taking a detailed inventory. It is your relationship with it, she said when he finished. My relationship with my own arm? With what it represents. A sacred gear is not a tool, Issei. It is not separate from you. It is an expression of something in you, which means the things you cannot access yet are usually things about yourself you have not accessed yet. He sat with this. That is a very inconvenient design. Most true things are. So what do I do? She looked at him steadily. You keep doing what you have been doing. You keep paying attention. You keep being honest, with yourself and with the people around you. She paused. You are already doing it. You are already closer than you were a month ago. I can see it when you use it. The dragon is more settled. That happens when the person carrying it becomes more settled. Issei looked at his arm. At the red gauntlet when it was manifested, at the ordinary skin and bone of his forearm when it was not. Drag, he said quietly, addressing the presence that lived somewhere in the deep current of the gear. A rumble. Low, distant, like thunder on the other side of a mountain. Not words but acknowledgement. Am I getting there? Issei asked. Another rumble. This one had a quality he was learning to interpret. Patient. Something like, yes, but there is no shortcut, and I would not give you one if there were. He looked at Rias. He is annoyingly cryptic for someone who lives in my arm. All the great ones are, she said, and there was amusement in it, and also something else, a pride she was not quite trying to hide. Are you proud of me? He asked, because he had been practicing directness. She did not look away. Yes, she said. I have been for a while. He nodded. Okay. Good. I am going to keep going, then. I know, she said. That is why. He left the clubroom 10 minutes later and walked home in the last of the day's light and thought about doors that had not opened yet and what it meant that you could feel their edges. He thought, the feeling of the edge is also information. The edge means you are close. The edge means the room is real. He thought, I am going to find out what is on the other side. He was not impatient about it. That, in itself, was a kind of progress. Chapter 14. Saturday morning and the education of eggshells. He saved every eggshell from breakfast for 3 weeks before he had enough to feel worth bringing. He kept them in a paper bag on his windowsill, drying, the way he had read they needed to before they were useful. His mother had observed this process with curiosity, and eventually asked. They are for a tomato plant, he said. We have a tomato plant? A friend does. On the school roof. His mother had nodded with the composed expression of a woman who had already accepted that her son's life had become several things she had not anticipated. He crushed the shells in the bag on the third Saturday morning, and carried them up to the school roof. Koneko was already there, doing whatever maintenance she had decided needed doing, which today involved carefully repositioning one of the planter boxes to catch a slightly different angle of light. He held up the bag. She looked at it. She looked at him. 3 weeks, he said. Enough, she said, which in Kaneko's register was a significant statement. She showed him how to work the crushed shells into the soil around the base of the plant, and he did it carefully, following her instructions exactly. She did not make him feel like he was being supervised. She treated it as collaborative, which it was. When they were done, she looked at the plant with the evaluative attention she gave to it. The third fruit is almost ready, she said. How do you know? Color. The depth of it. She pointed at the largest of the 3 tomatoes, the one that had been closest to ripe for the past 2 weeks. See how the red has stopped being bright and become dark? That is when they are done. Issei looked. She was right. It was darker, richer, less like a thing declaring its presence, and more like a thing that had arrived somewhere. Can we pick it? She considered. Then she reached in and detached it from the stem with a clean, sure motion. She handed it to him. It was small, slightly irregular, warm from the sun. He turned it in his fingers. It smelled, even this early in the morning, of something real and specific, the way produce from a garden smelled different from produce from a store. More itself, somehow. Try it, Koneko said. He bit into it. It was good. Better than it had any reasonable right to be, given that it had grown in a wooden box on a school rooftop in questionable soil that needed calcium supplementation. This is really good, he said. Things you grow yourself usually are. He finished it. She went back to checking the other plants. He sat on the low wall in the morning light and listened to the city waking up below them, the layered sounds of Saturday finding its rhythm. Koneko, he said. Yes. I am glad you let me come up here. She did not answer immediately. She moved the watering can with precision. So am I, she said. It was 4 words. It was a paragraph. He was fluent enough now to know the difference. Chapter 15. What happens at the end of Act 2? On the last day of the 6th week, Issei stayed after club activities and wrote, in his notebook. He wrote, Something has shifted. I do not know exactly when it happened or whether it was a single moment or the accumulation of many small ones, but something in the way I move through my days is different from the way I moved through them 7 weeks ago. He wrote, Rias laughed unexpectedly on Thursday and covered it, and then did not quite cover it all the way. I think she is beginning to understand that being seen is not the same as being exposed. He wrote, Akeno told me something about her mother. She did it the same way she does everything, with warmth that is also armor, except that day the armor was thinner in a way she seemed to have chosen. I think she is testing whether the real version of her is safe with me. I am trying to make sure it is. He wrote, Koneko gave me the first tomato. You might think this is a small thing. It is not. He stopped. Looked at what he had written. Looked at the clubroom around him, the worn table and the window that stuck unless you pushed the right corner, and the afternoon light coming in at the particular angle that made the old wood of the floor look like it was lit from inside. He wrote, I have been thinking about what Rias said about the gear and about the room with the doorframe and no door yet. I think it applies to more than the gear. I think I have been standing in the doorframe of something for a while and I am beginning to understand the shape of it. He wrote, It is not a single thing with a single name. It is more like a collection of things that add up to something. The tea on weekday mornings. The rooftop on Saturdays. The umbrella in the rain. The blanket on the couch after a late night. The way a sentence sounds when it has been said honestly, and the room makes space for it. He wrote, I think I know what it is. I am not ready to write it down completely yet. But I am not afraid of it. That is new. He closed the notebook. He had been writing for 20 minutes and had not noticed the door open, but when he looked up, Akeno was in the doorway with her school bag and her coat over her arm and the particular expression she wore when she was deciding something. You left your umbrella again, she said. It is not raining. It will be. She held out hers. Not all the way, not a full offer, just an indication of direction. Walk home together? Issei put the notebook in his bag. He stood up. He looked at her, at the umbrella, at the door, at the afternoon light coming through the old windows one more time. Yeah, he said. Let us go. They walked out of the clubroom together, and the door clicked shut behind them, and the room they left was quiet and warm and full of a day that had happened and become part of what came next. Outside, by the time they reached the school gates, it had started to rain. She had known it would. She had brought an umbrella anyway. He walked beside her under it and thought, some people prepare for you before you know you need it. He thought, I want to be that kind of person for them. He thought, I think I am becoming that person. He thought, good.